Don't drink it, Seo-yeon whispered, her fingers closing around the glass before Tae-jun could lift it. Kang Tae-jun's hand stopped above the crystal tumbler. Amber liquor caught the chandelier light, throwing thin gold reflections across the polished walnut table. Around him, silverware rested untouched, the soft clink of porcelain coming from the distant dining room almost too ordinary for the silence that had suddenly settled over the private suite. Seo-yeon stood beside him in her black waitress uniform, one hand still holding the glass, the other pressed flat against her apron. She had spoken only because something was wrong. Tae-jun slowly raised his eyes to hers. Most people lowered their gaze when the Korean Mafia boss looked at them. Seo-yeon didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the drink. What did you say? His voice was quiet, controlled, almost gentle. She swallowed once. Don't drink it. The woman sitting across from him gave a soft laugh. Her name was Yoon Hae-rin, a sophisticated businesswoman with a cream-colored dress, diamond earrings, and a perfume that carried faintly across the table like jasmine. She reached toward Tae-jun's wrist. She's nervous, Hae-rin said. It's just whiskey. Tae-jun did not look at her. His gaze remained on Seo-yeon. The waitress had already stepped back, but her fingers were trembling against the folded white towel in her palm. She had seen the bottle opened. She had seen Hae-rin insist on pouring the first drink herself. And she had noticed something else, the faint chemical smell beneath the whiskey, sharp enough to cut through the warmth of the oak and the citrus from the candles. Tae-jun picked up the glass. Seo-yeon's breath caught. He turned it slightly beneath the chandelier. A thin smear clung to the inner rim, almost invisible against the amber liquid. You're certain? He asked. Seo-yeon nodded. I saw her touch the rim. Hae-rin's smile disappeared for less than a second. It was enough.
Seo-yeon noticed.
He placed the glass down. The crystal touched the walnut with a small, precise click. Everyone out. His security team immediately moved toward the doors, black suits brushing against the velvet chairs. Hae-rin rose slowly, her expression changing from surprise to concern. Tae-jun, what is this? He finally looked at her. You tell me. She took one step toward him. Seo-yeon moved between them without thinking. The room became still. Tae-jun looked down at the waitress, then at the untouched drink. A woman who had spent the entire evening disappearing into the background had just placed herself between a powerful man and the woman trying to control his attention. Your name, he said.
Han Seo-yeon.
How long have you worked here? 8 months. And in 8 months, have you ever interrupted a VIP dinner? She shook her head. Then why tonight? Seo-yeon looked at the glass again. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. Because the drink was never meant to be the dangerous part. Tae-jun went completely still. For the first time that evening, the room felt colder than the marble beneath their feet. Kang Tae-jun stared at the untouched whiskey as Seo-yeon's final words hung between them. The drink was never meant to be the dangerous part. The chandelier above them hummed softly, casting warm light across the walnut table, while the air conditioning sent a thin chill along the marble floor. Tae-jun slowly pushed the glass away. Then what was? Seo-yeon looked toward Yoon Hae-rin. The woman's diamond earrings caught the light as she folded her hands neatly in her lap. You're frightening her, Hae-rin said, forcing a small smile. She probably made a mistake. Tae-jun raised one finger. His security team stopped. Nobody leaves. The words landed harder than a shout. Seo-yeon stepped toward the bar and picked up the whiskey bottle. The dark glass was cool beneath her fingers. She turned it once beneath the chandelier, then placed it beside the untouched tumbler. She didn't pour from this bottle, Seo-yeon said. Tae-jun's eyes shifted to the bottle. Explain. The bottle was opened at the table. Seo-yeon pointed to the cap, but the seal was already broken before dinner. Hae-rin immediately stood. The legs of her chair scraped across the polished floor. That proves nothing.
Seo-yeon looked ahead. Sit.
She sat. Seo-yeon reached for a clean glass from the bar, filled it with water, and placed it beside the whiskey. Then she took the original tumbler and moved it away from Tae-jun. You switched glasses, Tae-jun said. Seo-yeon nodded. Before you came back from the restroom. Hae-rin's face hardened. Are you accusing me? Seo-yeon did not answer. Instead, she walked to the small service cart near the wall and lifted the linen napkin that had covered the second glass. The scent of citrus cleaner and warm fabric rose from it. This one was prepared for him.
Tae-jun stepped closer.
His black suit brushed the edge of the table, and the faint scent of cedar from his cologne mixed with the whiskey in the air. He examined the glass without touching it. Why would someone prepare a second glass? Hae-rin asked. Maybe the waitress brought the wrong one. Tae-jun turned towards Seo-yeon. You said the drink wasn't the dangerous part. She hesitated. Then she reached into the pocket of her apron and removed a folded receipt. When I cleared the table earlier, she asked me to deliver this to you.
Tae-jun unfolded it.
A room number was written on the back in black ink. Beside it was a time. 11:30 p.m. His eyes hardened. Hae-rin stood again. Tae-jun listened to me. He folded the receipt once. You knew exactly what room this was for. The room fell silent except for the quiet vibration of the air conditioning. Seo-yeon stepped backward, ready to return to the dining floor, but Tae-jun stopped her. No, she looked back. You stay. His voice was calm, but the order changed the balance of the room. He placed the receipt on the table between them. If someone planned to trap me tonight, I want to know why you were the only person who saw it. Seo-yeon lowered her eyes to the receipt. Then she looked directly at him. Because I was the one serving your table. Tae-jun held her gaze for several seconds. Finally, he reached for his phone. Then you're serving me one more thing tonight. He turned toward Hae-rin. The truth. Hae-rin reached for her handbag, but Tae-jun stepped away from the table and quietly blocked the path to the door. The marble floor reflected. The chandelier in long strips of gold, while the cool air from the vents stirred the edge of his black jacket. You wanted the truth, Hae-rin said, keeping her voice steady. Then ask me what you actually want to know.
Tae-jun watched her for a moment.
Why did you arrange a private room at 11:30? Her fingers tightened around the leather handle of her bag. Because I wanted to speak to you, without your people listening. You had all evening.
Not like this.
She moved closer to the table, but Tae-jun did not move. Her perfume lingered above the warm scent of whiskey and polished wood. You built an entire life around people who fear you, she said. I thought, for one night, you might want someone who didn't. Seo-yeon remained near the service cart, her white towel folded precisely between both hands. She watched Hae-rin's movements, not her face.
Hae-rin noticed.
You, she said sharply. You think you know everything because you carry plates? Seo-yeon lowered her eyes. No, one word. Quiet. Firm. Tae-jun turned slightly toward her. Then why are you still standing there? Seo-yeon placed the towel on the cart. Because you told me to stay. Hae-rin gave a short laugh.
See?
She follows orders. Tae-jun's expression did not change. Unlike you. The room went silent.
Hae-rin's smile vanished.
She opened her handbag and pulled out a small velvet case. The hinges made a soft metallic click as she placed it on the table. Inside was a silver cufflink engraved with Tae-jun's initials. You left this at my apartment last week, she said. I thought you might want it back. Tae-jun looked at it, then at her. I have never been to your apartment. Hae-rin's fingers froze above the case. Seo-yeon's eyes moved toward the cufflink, then immediately back to Hae-rin. Tae-jun reached down and closed the case. Enough. Hae-rin's voice sharpened. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly what I'm doing. He picked up his phone and made one call. Cancel tomorrow's meeting with Hae-rin. A pause. And cancel every private appointment arranged through her. Hae-rin stared at him. You're ending this because a waitress made you suspicious?
Tae-jun's gaze shifted to Seo-yeon.
No, he looked back at Hae-rin. I'm ending it because you made one mistake. Hae-rin stepped forward. What mistake? Tae-jun slid the velvet case across the table. You tried to make me believe I had already chosen you. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Seo-yeon finally moved, picking up the untouched whiskey and carrying it toward the locked service cabinet. Tae-jun watched her place it inside and turn the key. When she returned, he spoke without looking away from Hae-rin. Seo-yeon. She stopped. Tomorrow night, you will serve my table again. Her fingers tightened around the key. Why? Tae-jun's eyes settled on hers. Because whoever arranged this honey trap expected me to trust the woman sitting across from me. He paused. Instead, I trusted the woman who barely spoke. The next evening, Seo-yeon placed a fresh glass on Kang Tae-jun's table and stepped back before anyone could touch it. The private dining room smelled of toasted sesame and cedar, while warm amber light slid across the black lacquer table. Tae-jun watched her from across the room. He had arrived alone except for his security detail waiting beyond the frosted glass doors. You said I should serve you, Seo-yeon said. So I am. Tae-jun glanced at the glass. And tonight? Tonight, I don't touch your drink. She turned toward the service cart. Tae-jun almost smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes.
Good.
The door opened. Yoon Hae-rin entered wearing a dark blue suit, her hair pinned neatly behind one ear, a slim silver bracelet catching the chandelier light. She carried no handbag, no velvet case, nothing that looked suspicious. I thought you canceled everything, she said.
Tae-yun remained seated.
I changed my mind. Hae-rin looked at Seo-yeon. She's still here? She works here. You trust her that much? Tae-jun picked up his water glass. More than I trust you. Hae-rin took the seat across from him. A server placed dinner between them, then disappeared behind the door. Steam rose from a porcelain bowl, carrying the scent of ginger and scallions through the cool room. For several minutes, Hae-rin spoke about business, travel, and a charity event she wanted Tae-jun to attend. Her voice stayed smooth. Her hands stayed still. Then she leaned forward. You know what I like about you? Tae-jun said nothing. You don't pretend to be harmless. Her eyes held his. That's rare. Seo-yeon quietly replaced the water glasses. When she reached Hae-rin's side of the table, Hae-rin shifted her chair. The movement was small, but it forced Seo-yeon to step around her instead of behind her.
Caracol, Hae-rin murmured.
You almost spilled that. Seo-yeon steadied the pitcher.
Sorry. Hae-rin smiled.
You should be. Tae-jun's fingers stopped against the rim of his glass. Enough. Hae-rin turned toward him. I wasn't insulting her. You were. The room tightened around the silence. Hae-rin leaned back, then reached beneath the table and placed a small white envelope beside Tae-jun's plate. Then let's talk about something more important. Tae-jun did not open it. What is it? A proposal. Seo-yeon froze near the service cart. Hae-rin's voice softened. Leave your organization for one night.
No guards. No phones. No interruptions.
Just you and me. Tae-jun looked at the envelope. Where? A private suite downtown.
Hae-rin smiled.
Everything is already arranged. Tae-jun finally picked up the envelope. The paper was thick and warm from her hand. He opened it. Inside was a room key and a handwritten address. Seo-yeon stepped forward. Sir.
Tae-yun looked ahead.
What? She pointed toward the key without touching it. That room number. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It's the same number written on yesterday's receipt. Hae-rin's expression changed. Tae-jun slowly set the key down. Then he stood. You wanted me alone tonight, he said. Now you have my answer. His gaze hardened on Hae-rin. I'm going. For the first time, Hae-rin smiled again. But Tae-jun turned to Seo-yeon. You're coming with me. The elevator doors closed behind Kang Tae-jun and Han Seo-yeon with a soft metallic chime, sealing them inside a narrow cabin of brushed steel and warm recessed light. The quiet hum of the motor rose beneath their feet as the numbers climbed toward the private suite. Seo-yeon stood 3 feet away, hands folded over her apron, while Tae-jun held the small room key between 2 fingers. You don't have to come, he said. She looked at the key. You told me to. I'm giving you a choice now. Seo-yeon lifted her eyes. Then I'll come. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a carpeted hallway smelling faintly of cedar and expensive cleaning solution. Tae-jun walked first. Seo-yeon followed, her shoes making almost no sound against the thick carpet. At the end of the corridor, Hae-rin waited beside the private suite door. She looked perfectly composed, one hand resting on the brass handle. I didn't expect you to bring her, she said. Tae-jun slipped the key into the lock. Neither did I. The door opened into a dim sitting room washed in gold light. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city beyond the glass, while the low hum of the ventilation system stirred the curtains. A table had been prepared for two. Crystal glasses. A bottle of wine. Plates covered with silver lids. Everything was arranged with almost unnatural precision. Seo-yeon stopped at the threshold.
Tae-jun noticed.
What? She looked at the table. Nothing. You don't say nothing. She stepped inside and removed her white service gloves. Then I'll say this. She walked toward the table and lifted one silver lid. Steam escaped, carrying the smell of grilled beef and rosemary. She looked beneath the second lid, then the third. Nothing unusual. Tae-jun remained near the door. You expected something? I expected you to be alone. Haren's voice came from behind them.
Tae-jun turned.
That's what you wanted? Yes. She closed the door. The lock clicked. Seo-yeon's hand immediately moved toward the back of a chair. Tae-jun noticed the movement. Stay behind me. Seo-yeon shook her head. No, he looked at her.
No.
If this is a trap, standing behind you doesn't make me safer. Her voice remained quiet. It makes me harder to see. Tae-jun studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. Haren walked toward the table and poured wine into two glasses. The red liquid caught the chandelier light. You came all this way, she said to Tae-jun. At least sit down. Tae-jun did not. Move. You first.
Haerin smiled.
Still suspicious. Still alive. She lowered the bottle. Seo-yeon suddenly stepped forward and took the wineglass from Haren's hand. Haren's expression sharpened. What are you doing? Seo-yeon placed the glass on the table, making sure he doesn't drink it.
Tae-jun looked ahead.
You said the drink wasn't the dangerous part. Seo-yeon nodded. It isn't. Then she turned toward the closed bedroom door at the far end of the suite. A faint electronic beep came from behind it.
Once.
Then again.
Tae-jun's face changed.
He reached for the handle, but Seo-yeon caught his sleeve. Wait. The third beep sounded. A red indicator light appeared beneath the door. Seo-yeon released him. Now, she whispered, we know why they needed you alone. The red light beneath the bedroom door stayed steady as Kang Tae-jun stepped toward it, but Han Seo-yeon caught his arm again. The hallway beyond the suite was silent, the thick carpet swallowing every footstep, while the cool air from the vent brushed across the back of her neck. Not that door, she whispered. Tae-jun looked down at her hand, then at her face. Then tell me what you want me to do. Before she could answer, Yoon Hae-rin moved. She crossed the room quickly, took the room key from the table, and locked the main door from the inside. The metal bolt slid into place with a hard click. Nobody leaves, she said. Tae-jun turned toward her. You just made the worst decision of your life. Hae-rin ignored him and looked at Seo-yeon. You should have stayed in the restaurant. Seo-yeon slowly released Tae-jun's sleeve. Why? Because now you're involved. Hae-rin reached into her jacket and placed a phone on the table. Its screen was already recording. The soft electronic hum seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. One call, she said. One sentence from you, Tae-jun, and everything you've built becomes a scandal by morning. Tae-jun stepped closer to the phone. What sentence? Hae-rin pressed the screen. A video appeared. The image showed Tae-jun entering the hotel with Hae-rin earlier that evening, followed by another clip of them sitting together at dinner. The angle made their meeting look intimate, private, deliberate. Seo-yeon watched without speaking. Hae-rin turned toward her. And you were there. Seo-yeon's fingers tightened around the edge of the service cart. So, if this goes public, you're the waitress who helped arrange it. Tae-jun's head turned sharply toward Hae-rin. She didn't arrange anything.
Hae-rin smiled.
That's what you'll say. But the cameras don't record what you say. They record what people believe. She picked up the phone and walked towards Seo-yeon. You have two choices. The perfume on her jacket mixed with the faint scent of wine and polished wood. Walk out that door alone and say you made a mistake, or stay beside him and become part of the story. Seo-yeon looked at the locked door. Then she looked at Tae-jun. He was already reaching for the phone. Don't, Seo-yeon said.
He stopped.
Why? Because that's what she wants. Hae-rin's smile returned. Seo-yeon stepped forward and took the phone from the table. The screen glowed against her face. She turned it toward Tae-jun. If he reacts now, she controls the story.
Tae-jun ist Joe-zeitend.
And what do you suggest? Seo-yeon placed the phone face down. Let her believe she still controls you. Hae-rin stared at her. You think you can outsmart me? Seo-yeon shook her head. No. She reached into her apron and removed the room key Tae-jun had given her earlier. Then she placed it on the table. I think you already made your mistake. Hae-rin's eyes narrowed. What mistake? Seo-yeon looked directly at her. You locked the door before you knew who had the key. Tae-jun slowly turned towards Seo-yeon. She pressed the key against the edge of the table. A tiny green light blinked. The lock on the main door released with a soft mechanical click. Hae-rin stepped back. Tae-jun took the key from Seo-yeon, and for the first time that night, the balance of the room shifted completely. Now, he said quietly, you're going to tell me who taught you how to set this trap. Hae-rin stared at the open door, then at the key in Kang Tae-jun's hand, while the red indicator beneath the bedroom door continued to blink behind them. The suite smelled of spilled wine and cold metal, and the city lights beyond the windows flickered across the polished floor. You want a name? She asked.
Fine. Tae-jun waited.
Seo-yeon stood beside him, her hands resting against the black fabric of her apron. Hae-rin slowly picked up the phone from the table. You already know the name. She turned the screen toward him. A message was waiting. One sentence. Bring him upstairs alone. Tae-jun read it once. Then, he handed the phone to Seo-yeon. Did you expect this? She looked at the screen, then shook her head.
Numero, Hae-rin long hair softly. There. You see?
Even she doesn't know everything. Tae-jun moved toward the window and looked down at the city. Traffic flowed 600 feet below, tiny white headlights sliding through the darkness. You weren't hired to seduce me, he said. Hae-rin's expression changed. No. You were hired to make me look compromised. She said nothing.
Tae-jun turned.
Who benefits? Hae-rin placed both palms on the table. Someone who wants your position.
Who?
Someone close enough to know your schedule. Seo-yeon stepped forward. And close enough to know the restaurant.
Tae-jun looked ahead.
She pointed toward the room key. The reservation was made using information from inside your organization. Hae-rin shook her head. You think this is about money, isn't it?
Tae-jun asked.
No, her voice dropped. It is about making you disappear without anyone asking where you went. The room fell quiet. Seo-yeon looked toward the bedroom door. That's why the cameras were there.
Tae-jun nodded once.
A private room. A woman. A recording. A drink. Hae-rin lowered her gaze. And a story ready before the night even began. Tae-jun walked to the door and opened it fully. 2 security men immediately appeared in the hallway. Clear the floor, he ordered. They moved away. Tae-jun turned back to Hae-rin. You're coming with me. She stiffened. Where? Back to the restaurant. Why? He picked up the phone containing the message and slipped it into his pocket. Because whoever sent that message thinks you're still inside their plan. Hae-rin stared at him. And you think taking me back there will expose them? No. Tae-jun looked towards Seo-yeon.
She will.
Seo-yeon blinked. Me? You noticed the trap before I did. He held out his hand. Now I need you to notice what happens when we walk back into the place where it started. Seo-yeon hesitated, then placed the room key in his palm. What if they expect that too? Tae-jun closed his fingers around the key. Then we stopped following their plan. They left the suite together. The elevator doors opened with a muted chime, and the 3 stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Hae-rin suddenly whispered, You should know something. Tae-jun looked at her reflection in the steel wall. What? She swallowed. The honey trap wasn't supposed to end with you drinking anything. The elevator began descending. It was supposed to end with Seo-yeon taking the blame. Kang Tae-jun returned to the restaurant with Seo-yeon and Hae-rin just before midnight, but he did not enter through the main doors. The service elevator opened into the quiet back corridor, where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the stainless steel walls smelled faintly of detergent and steamed rice. Seo-yeon walked beside him, still wearing her black uniform, while Haerin followed several steps behind. You said the trap was meant to end with her taking the blame, Tae-jun said. Haerin kept her eyes forward. Yes. Then why bring me upstairs? Because you were supposed to believe you had chosen her over everyone else. Seo-yeon stopped walking. Tae-jun stopped with her. What does that mean? Haerin turned. It means the story was never about the woman in the room. She pointed at Seo-yeon. It was about the waitress standing beside you. Seo-yeon's fingers tightened around the folded towel at her waist. They wanted me to be seen with him. Exactly. Haerin took a breath. The cameras would show you entering the suite together. The drink would become irrelevant. By morning, everyone would believe Tae-jun had been caught in a private scandal with a restaurant employee.
재훈의 haltend.
And you would disappear from the story. Yes. Seo-yeon looked at Tae-jun. That's why you brought me upstairs. He nodded slowly. I wanted whoever planned this to believe the trap was working. They entered the private dining room. The chandelier still burned above the empty table, and the abandoned whiskey glass remained where they had left it, its surface dull beneath the warm light. Tae-jun walked directly to the table and picked up the glass. Seo-yeon reached for it. Don't.
He stopped.
Why? Because it's already done its job. She took the glass from his hand and placed it inside the locked service cabinet. Now they think you drank from it.
재훈 looks ahead.
And what happens next? They wait.
Haerin stepped back closer.
Until the recording reaches the right person. Tae-jun pulled out his phone. Then let them wait. He made a call and gave one instruction. Release the footage. Seo-yeon turned sharply. All of it. All of it. Haerin stared at him. You're exposing yourself. No, Tae-jun looked at Seo-yeon. I'm exposing the trap. Within minutes, the restaurant's private security screens displayed the complete recording from the suite, the untouched drink, Haerin locking the door, the room key, and Seo-yeon stopping Tae-jun from entering the bedroom too quickly. The edited version suddenly became meaningless. Haerin lowered her phone. You planned this. Tae-jun shook his head. She did. He nodded towards Seo-yeon. I just listened. Seo-yeon looked at the screens. Her face remained still, but her hand slowly loosened around the towel.
재훈 stepped beside her.
You saved me twice. She looked up. Once from the drink, he said, and once from the story they wanted everyone to believe. Haerin said nothing. The balance had shifted completely. Then Seo-yeon noticed one final thing on the security monitor. The restaurant entrance camera showed a man in a dark suit waiting outside, holding the same silver cufflink Haerin had brought the first night. She turned to Tae-jun. He's here.
재훈 followed her gaze.
The man looked directly into the camera. Then he raised one hand and made a simple gesture toward the private dining room. Come alone. Tae-jun's phone vibrated. One message appeared. Midnight. One last meeting. Bring the waitress. The man waiting outside the restaurant stepped into the private dining room, and the silver cufflink in his hand flashed beneath the chandelier. Kang Tae-jun stood between him and Seo-yeon, while Haerin remained near the table, silent now. The room smelled of roasted coffee and polished wood, and the low refrigerator hum behind the bar filled the spaces between their breaths. You wanted the waitress, Tae-jun said. The man stopped 6 feet away. I wanted the woman who ruined the plan. Seo-yeon looked at him, without moving. Then you should have planned better. His eyes narrowed. Tae-jun glanced at her, then back at the man. You knew she would warn me. We knew she would notice the drink. The man lifted the silver cufflink. But we didn't expect her to understand why the room mattered. Tae-jun's hand tightened around the edge of the table. This ends tonight. It already has, the man replied. Your reputation was supposed to disappear with you. He placed the cufflink on the table. Instead, she kept you standing. Seo-yeon looked at the cufflink, then pushed it back toward him. You don't need this anymore. The man frowned. What? The story is over. Tae-jun turned toward her. Seo-yeon. She walked to the security monitor and pressed a button. The screen showed the complete footage from the suite, including Hae-rin locking the door, threatening them with the recording, and admitting that Seo-yeon was supposed to take the blame. Then another screen lit up. The same footage was already being transmitted to the restaurant's management system and the secure devices of Tae-jun's senior partners. The man stared at the screens. You recorded the confession. Seo-yeon shook her head. You did.
Tae-jun understood immediately.
He looked at Hae-rin. She lowered her eyes. Her role in the trap was no longer deniable. You thought the waitress was the weakest person in the room, Tae-jun said. That was your mistake. The man reached for his phone, but Tae-jun stepped forward and calmly took it from his hand.
No struggle. No shouting.
Just a single movement that ended the confrontation. Call them, Tae-jun said. Tell them the operation failed. The man stared at him. And, if I don't? Tae-jun placed the phone on the table. Then the recording speaks for you. The man looked toward Hae-rin. She finally nodded. It's over. Minutes later, the room emptied. Hae-rin left with the people who had come for her, and the man surrendered the remaining evidence, without another word. The restaurant became quiet again. Tae-jun stood beside the same table where Seo-yeon had first stopped his hand from lifting the poison drink. He looked at the glass cabinet, then at her. You saved my life. Seo-yeon shook her head. I saved you from drinking something you shouldn't, and from the woman who wanted to trap me. She looked down at her hands. You listened. Tae-jun took the room key from his pocket and placed it on the table. You don't work for me. Seo-yeon looked up. What? You don't owe me anything. Not your loyalty. Not your silence. Not your future. He pushed the key aside. Choose what you want. For a moment, only the soft ticking of the wall clock could be heard. Then Seo-yeon picked up her folded towel and returned it to the service cart. I think, she said quietly, I want to keep working here.
Tae-jun nodded.
Then I'll make sure no one ever mistakes your silence for weakness again. Under the warm restaurant lights, the woman everyone had overlooked and the man everyone feared stood on opposite sides of the same quiet table, and that night Tae-jun finally understood that the person who saved him was never the woman trying to win his trust, but the silent waitress who had nothing to gain except the chance to do what was right.